So I'm recording my homily for the 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time, and I am in Sequoia National Park. I'm on vacation, and I kind of lucked out. It's a beautiful day today. Last week it was snowing and raining, and so this week really, really beautiful. The trees that are around me are this collection of trees is called the Senate, as in some other trees are referred to the presidents because they're big, and this is the Senate because there's a whole bunch of them. I decided to rename them though because I count basically, if you go all the way around, about 12 of them. So I figured this is not the Senate, this is the apostles, right? So I get to record my homily with the 12 apostles. Now these giant sequoias, as you can see how tiny I am, these trees are just massive. These trees have been here, some of the oldest ones have been here almost 2,500 years. These probably close to 2,000 years. It's amazing. When you look at these trees and then you try to ponder the significance of our own lives in the grand scope of things. These trees have been here, they've been alive for so long, and each and every one of them was created by God, and I and you were created by God. But at the same time, it makes you feel so small because, we're here on the earth for such a short period of time, even compared just to these trees. And then just to expand that out to the whole universe, there's probably at some point a person begins to question whether or not their own life really has any significant bearing on God's mind, God's heart, God's mission, God's love, because we seem to be just so small. And I want to talk about that a little bit today in my homily, in the sense that that if we get trapped in that mindset, a couple things begin to happen. And one, I think we're seeing in our culture today amongst Catholics and Christians in general, and that is, if I'm so small, which I am, but if I'm so small in God's mind, then why should I even try to do anything meaningful? So God promises us, eternal salvation. He promises us heaven, and people can comprehend that and say, okay, great, I'm going to go to heaven. But anything I do is just so small that maybe I should just kind of wait, just not really do anything and just wait, kind of like these trees. Now, maybe they named these trees the Senate because they don't do anything, right? No, haha, just kidding. Bad joke. So I want to break out of that. Now, the gospel this Sunday is about these three individuals. It's a parable, and they were entrusted with a certain amount of money to use, and the term they use is talents, right? The gold talents, which there's a play on the word of using your talents, right? Your gifts. But here it's a measure of money. And so the first two receive that money with great confidence. It's like they didn't even hesitate. It's like they knew what to do. They had experience. And so the first thing I would say is that when a person is going to embark on a mission for God, when they're going to do something, it implies that they know what to do. That's what gives us confidence. When you want to do something for the first time, so when I was coming here, it's like I didn't know which trail to go on. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know which campground to stay in. And so I didn't have any experience. And so I felt very insecure about it. So I was constantly asking people questions, in a few instances, to say, where should I go? Where, are all those kinds of questions. When I was sitting right back here, there's a tree called the President, and it's really, really big. And I was sitting there and I noticed there was some people who walked by me and they were engaged in a conversation, and they didn't even look at me. They didn't even look at me, right? But then a little bit later, a few minutes later, I got up and I was walking, and there was another couple that came by, and they were kind of lost, and they were looking for a specific trail. Now, I didn't have the information for them, but they were very friendly, at least in part, because they needed some information, they needed help, right? And so in our own lives, when we are struggling with, or when we're looking, we want security, we want confidence in our ability to do things for our Lord, we need to get to that point. So if we're not to that point, then we start looking for the information. We start trying to develop our skills and our abilities to do that. Now, if we don't, if we persist in a state of insecurity or and I'm not using this term as a bad term, but incompetence. I don't know how to serve God. I don't know how I don't know how to do something great. And so then perhaps at some point I just give up because of that insecurity. And that can even begin to really warp my understanding, or our understanding, of God's relationship with ourselves. So you'll see that with children and parents, right? And so children with parents, if the child's afraid they're going to be punished for doing anything creative or trying anything new, they're going to learn not to try anything new. Or if they do it, they just do it secretly or whatever, right? And so that insecurity then begins to color how they view the world, how they view themselves. And so if somebody views God that way, it's like, no, God's kind of mean. God just wants you to follow the 10 Commandments. God doesn't want you to be creative. He doesn't want you to try anything new. You just kind of hide behind the tree, which I could do here easily. You just hide behind the tree and just wait for the end, right? So when we get to the third person in the story, who's given the least amount of talent, but he's afraid of God. He says, God, you're the one who reaps when you didn't sow. You're the one who's kind of harsh. And so just to survive, just to do the bare minimum, I went and buried the treasure so that I could give it to you later. But I've done nothing. I did nothing. I wasted my entire life. So obviously we don't want to do that, right? Now the first two, again, they just have this confidence. So this is kind of a story of investment. They take their talents and they invest them, they use them. And what it also implies is they're willing to take a risk. They're willing to be creative. They're willing to find a way to accomplish some mission for this owner, for this master, and for our Heavenly Father. And so I think Jesus really and truly wants us to take from this is that we need to approach life that way. That if life has become just about paying the bills and just getting the kids through school and just kind of jumping through those life hoops until I retire or until I die, then we've really become that third steward, the third person. And that's not a very good situation. Now, you notice children, sometimes children are really shy, right? But children, generally speaking, are only shy to strangers. They feel very comfortable around the people who love them, the people who know them. And so, as a priest, I'm often being introduced to little kids, or there's new families, or, and the child will feel comfortable. But then as soon as I direct my attention to the child and I want to shake their hand, they'll kind of hide behind their parent's leg. Now, that's normal behavior, right? It's normal behavior for a child, though. Now, as the child gets to know me or the other stranger, the person that they don't know very well, as they get to know them, they start to feel more comfortable. And I'll notice that with children, at first they're afraid to get the blessing in the communion line, right? When their parents come up for the Eucharist. But then as they get more comfortable, then they want the blessing. Then they're standing out in front of the parents, and then they feel so proud, and they feel like they've received something great. And so that transformation, now we want to learn how in our faith to have that kind of confidence. Okay, to have that kind of confidence so that we're not hiding from God, but when He gives us a talent, when He gives us something in our life, a mission, then we're guns a-blazing, we want to do it, let's go for it, right? Okay, now I'm kind of combining a couple elements. One is It's the fear that comes from just being unfamiliar, just being a stranger, right? But then there's a different kind of fear when there's a fear of incompetence. I don't know what to do. And so we want to learn how, just in our own faith life, to be able to overcome both of those. The shyness we may have towards God, or maybe an incompetence. Now, if you're like me, you probably didn't grow up really mastering certain things about the faith, like prayer, really knowing how to speak and listen to Jesus Christ. I have to say, I did not listen to God in my prayer until I was in college, and that's a long story. But until I had an opportunity for someone to show me how to go deeper. And I think there's a lot of us who still haven't done that. Now, I've talked to people about going deeper in their prayer, and I don't think they do it deliberately, but they just kind of blow me off, right? So I have some people coming right in front, so I may have to pause the camera in a second. We'll see. Okay. So, where was I? And so then getting to the point, last week in my homily, I talked about how, okay, I'm getting distracted. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second here. Okay, I'm back. So the idea of being able to come and to master the different aspects of our faith. Last week in my homily, I talked about how there's this great book, Fire Within. And again, it's not a beginner's book necessarily, but I would say the average Catholic who really wants to be like one of the first two, who just wants to have that confidence in their faith life, to be able to know how to go deeper, especially in that prayer time. It's a fantastic resource. You are gleaming from the most spiritual mystics, the people who have the most profound relationships with God ever, and they're sharing their wisdom with you through that. Just faithfully participating in the sacramental life of the church, all those things. And then I could even go and talk about just developing our own ability, how to be more compassionate and charitable and loving towards people. All of those are things that we learn to develop. We learn skills. And we learn also to detach ourselves from things that are hindering us. I'm reading The Fire Within right now, and there's a chapter on detachment. And it's not just about being poor, but it's about learning to have the freedom to always be available, to always have that excitement, that courage to do exactly what God is seeking to do. And so the first two, when they go out and they invest immediately, now there's a lot of possibilities. They could screw up. They could lose it all. And then you'd think that they would go back to their master and absolutely devastated. They lost it all in their investment. Now, the story doesn't go down that path, but let's say, for example, we tried really, really hard with God. We take all the gifts that He's given us and we go back to Him and we say, God, I lost everything. I can't believe it. It's a disaster. How do you think God's going to react? He's a loving Father. Nothing is lost on God. Nothing, right? Every single thing we do in our life, even our mistakes, are not lost on God. And God will never ever see us when we try to make a sincere and conscientious attempt at fulfilling the mission of the gospel as a failure in any way. The only failure is the third person, is the person who buried their treasure. That is the only failure for God. And so if you have any fears that you're going to take the wrong path or you're going to do the wrong thing in trying to serve God, you don't have to worry about that. That's kind of the magical thing about grace, is that as long as we use it, as long as we try, it's going to work. Now, we're fallible, we make mistakes and all that. But nonetheless, as long as we use it, there's going to be fruit. It's guaranteed there's going to be fruit. It might not be the fruit that we thought or we planned on, but there's definitely going to be fruit. In the book that I was just reading, Fire Within, there's an analogy that's used, and I thought it was really great. And it's very pertinent here. You see these trees, they have burn marks, right? So they have survived through forest fires. And the analogy is that when you first try to light a log, let's say in your fireplace, you first try to light it on fire, it's like it doesn't want to be lit. It's like it's almost fighting it, right? And so you have to use all kinds of kindling and paper and all these things. And it may, if you don't have a lot of experience, it may take a couple tries to get the log lit. But at first it's like it doesn't want to be lit. And so I think in some ways that's kind of like us in our faith, is that we're either, when we're incompetent, we're really hesitant, we're timid, or whether we're just shy in our faith, whatever it is. It's like at first we resist, okay? And so if you find yourself resisting, if you find yourself in this spiritual battle, it's like, well, I want to grow, I want to do more, but there's this side of me that doesn't, it's afraid or whatever. And so to understand there's this battle, and that's perfectly normal and natural for those areas in our life when we're trying to master them, but it takes a little bit more to do it. And so it's kind of like the log, you're trying to light it, and at first you resist it. But as the log begins to warm up from the heat, okay, so you think of a person immersing themselves more in prayer, you think of a person immersing themselves more in the sacraments, more in the virtues of generosity and gentleness and kindness and courage, and more in love of their neighbor. The more they immerse themselves in it, the more, the warmer it gets, right? The more comfortable they feel with it. And they start breaking out of that shyness or the incompetence. And so it's like the log who's getting ready to catch fire. And then when that log catches fire, it wants to burn. It doesn't fight it any longer. It begins to consume. It begins to want the fire more and more, and then it gets hotter and hotter. And so when our Lord is working in our lives, and as we just relax and we surrender to God's action and to His grace, then more and more begins to happen, and we begin to feel more and more comfortable and at ease and confident with the graces that God gives us. All right. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'll be back for Thanksgiving in the parish, and I'll see you then. All right. God bless. Bye.